Hello, Ragers. Is it just me, or does it seem like Balenciaga is more of a social experiment than a brand? Like, guys, they have to be trolling us, right? What, Balenciaga Fortnite, Balenciaga Baby Yoda, Balenciaga Crocs? Who is wearing this stuff? Oh, I know. Kanye is wearing the Crocs, and that guy is so crazy. So, anyone who wears them must be crazy. It's like Balenciaga wants to be Venomance so bad. The current creative director for Balenciaga stole his last name from Venomance creative director. What is going on here? And look at how this runway model is moving. It's so abstract and avant-garde. I do not like it.
Their Adidas collab was kind of fire. I'll admit that 100%. Their Adidas collab was kind of gas.
Anyway, this all just feels like maybe we, the previously valued consumer, have become the butt of the joke. And honestly, I need to get to the bottom of this, because if I don't, then who will? I've truly never seen anyone else bring this issue up. It certainly doesn't get highlighted on Twitter every other week when the current NPC of the day notices something that their CPU can't process. Regardless, let's take a look at the history of this whimsical brand and see what will
I hate the shoes
and
so much.
don't forget to like and subscribe because you value my unmatched internet journalism skills.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
On January 21st, 1895, Cristobal Balenciaga was born in a small village in Spain. And as you can tell by his last name, this guy must be important to our story. As a young lad, he had taken a great interest in tailoring, as he would spend a lot of time around his mother who worked.
The founder of Balenciaga, Cristobal Balenciaga, will be rolling in his grave if you saw what the Balenciaga brand has become.
As a seamstress. He had garnered the attention of many in his hometown, and even had one of the most notable women in his town send him to Madrid for formal training in tailoring. That is pretty huge and crazy. From there, Balenciaga's work continued to become highly favorable in and amongst his native country, which led to him opening his first boutique in San Sebastian.
An important
in
fashion house.
However, as a result of the Spanish Civil War in 1936, Balenciaga was essentially forced to close up shop and head to Paris, a fate I would not wish upon anyone. Balenciaga did make the most of this, and it was reflected through his almost immediate success. He was praised by the likes of Coco Chanel, who was up to some interesting things of her own during this time period.
Wait a minute.
Coco Chanel, who was up to some...
Chanel's prominent standing and connections helped her regain control over her life at a crucial time as Adolf Hitler's forces began closing in on Germany's neighbors in the late 1930s.
Interesting things of her own.
Wait, what does that say down there? Wait, Chanel dated a German military officer. What? Oh, no.
During this time period. In 1937, Balenciaga opened his first Paris couture house and held his first runway show, which was heavily influenced by the Spanish Renaissance. His roots are very clear and commonly reflected throughout his work. Balenciaga was really in a league of his own. All his prior training combined with his unique vision set him apart from his competition. He was really involved throughout the entire creative process, always hands-on and in control of his craft. His thoughtfulness and efforts really show in his work, and his clients knew. In 1939, many buyers risked their lives traveling to Europe for his designs. Let's just skim over why Balenciaga was still able to operate during this time period. Anyway, after the war, Balenciaga's designs flourished. He played a major role in redefining the silhouettes of women's fashion, favoring fluid lines and a variety of other design innovations that resulted in this new silhouette that opposed the traditional hourglass shape. From 1950 to 1959, Balenciaga spent a lot of time experimenting with this new silhouette, which culminated in the Empire line as seen here, which obviously is very different from the traditional outfits of the time. Into the 1960s, Balenciaga experimented with a lot of different fabrics. He would use bold materials and heavy cloths, leading to the development of silk gazar, a stiffer fabric that was then used in suits, day dresses, and evening wear. Eventually closing up shop in 1968, it was without a doubt that Balenciaga's influence would go on to be felt throughout the years to come. Balenciaga was claimed to have lived a private life. He often denied the press and only gave one interview during his 50-year career. As stated by Emmanuel Ungaro, a French designer who trained with Balenciaga, he believed that Balenciaga laid the foundations of modernity. He later passed away in 1972 in his hometown in Spain. However, his legacy obviously lived on, with influences and references to his work remaining in the brand until this day. And understandably, after his passing, the Balenciaga label would close for the next 19 years. In 1986, however, the Bogart Group, which is an entrepreneurial venture in the fashion world, purchased the rights to Balenciaga apparel and fragrances, with Mikel Goma being selected as the new creative director of the brand, which reopened as a ready-to-wear line inspired by the OG Balenciaga's 1947 perfume line Le 10. Goma launched his women's wear collection by the same name. Goma remained as creative director until 1992, where he was succeeded by Josephus Thimster, who is regarded as the one to bring Balenciaga back to that high fashion status. Themister, a prominent Dutch interior decorator and fashion designer who had worked with the likes of Karl Lagerfeld and spent 5.5 years as the creative director for Balenciaga, his modernist vision correlated with that of the OG Balenciagas, so I feel as if it made sense to appoint him creative director and have him to be the one to bring Balenciaga back to high fashion. Themister has a really interesting story, and I definitely recommend checking it out, but he was actually fired from Balenciaga after an L of...
For the love of God, what is this? It's the history of Balenciaga and whether or not modern Balenciaga is continuing the tradition of the brand of the fashion house, or whether it is strayed away from it, and is it doing meta irony
of a show where the audience literally started walking out because of the insanely loud and abrupt music. He sadly passed away in 2019, but his work definitely lives on and remains memorable. Getting back to it, during Themister's time as creative director, Nicolas Gasquet would join the brand as a licensed designer, which eventually led to him becoming the new creative director in 1997 until 2012. In 2001 was when the Gucci Group, or Kering, which owns the rights to Gucci, Bottega, YSL, and Alexander McQueen.
For a lot of chatters wondering why fashion houses were aligning with fashion in the 30s and 40s is because the fashion leaders like Mussolini were banning most haute couture they deemed to be unpatriotic and a threat to the national identity that they were trying to cultivate. Fashion history is always interesting when looking at how it has been deemed as a subversive or conservative art form. I mean, that's like if paintings had utility. I mean, I guess you could say that they did in propaganda. Yeah.
Acquired the rights to Balenciaga as well. Gasquet, who was originally a self-taught designer, worked under Jean-Paul Gaultier and bought a fresh, young interpretation of a lot of Balenciaga classic pieces, such as the semi-fitted jacket and sack dress. He was regarded as the hippest, hottest, and most sought-after creator by fashion aficionados at the time. He elaborated on the work of the past and provided a variety of new abstract ideas of his own. And keep in mind, he was only 25 at the time.
Is it ever possible for fashion to not be so class divided? It's art. Like, if you don't have time or money, or money equals free time anyway, you're not going to be able to venture off into these pursuits. No matter how fucking bohemian artists try to present themselves as historically, it's usually people who are wealthy enough to have free time. Obviously, there is exceptions, but usually even those exceptions inevitably lead to wealthy benefactors propping them up. You can't do this kind of shit if you don't have free time. Unless you live in a socialist society.
Time he became creative director, which is pretty unfathomable. In 2002, he did get into some...
This is art, but attached to a very inaccessible consumer market. Not all art is. Historically, most art was commissioned by the wealthy. Like, if we're talking about paintings and whatnot. What? Like, almost all of this, especially and fashion too in general. The wealthy or the church, like other, institutions.
Controversy involving plagiarism, but that didn't seem to stop him. He did well at Balenciaga and became known for his sense of contrast seen amongst his designs.
It's interesting to think that like a lot of the paintings that you see in a museum, which you can go to that's like relatively cheap, was one, commissioned by the wealthy or churches or, made by wealthy people. And then two, the only reason why you can go into those museums as cheaply as you can is also because the wealthy still prop up those museums to this fucking day. By, through philanthropic endeavors, as a way to do class, as a way to signify their class. But they do, patronages and sponsorships and whatnot, specifically to show other wealthy people how fucking rich and cultured they are.
He worked with previous collaborators of the brand and maintained the ethos of Balenciaga throughout his time as creative director.
Yeah.
All at the
Basquiat is a great example of how an incredibly poor man can't be successful as an artist without money. His art could have never been seen by millions if it weren't for funding. Yeah.
Time while aiding and turning in Balenciaga into one of the most profitable high fashion brands amongst those a part of the Gucci Group. However, in November of 2012, he would announce his departure from the brand and go on to become creative director for LV Women's in the next year. Following Gasquet, Alexander Wang would make a brief stint as creative director for Balenciaga. This was obviously before all of the drama that Wang would be involved in. At the time, Wang was on the rise and had garnered quite a bit of recognition throughout the industry, so Wang seemed pretty fitting to continue the hip and cool direction that Balenciaga had been heading in. Wang's debut collection was for fall-winter 2013, and he had a pretty short time frame to complete the collection, but it was stayed true to the roots of the brand. Although not necessarily crazy innovative and out of this world, the collection served as a respectful debut. Fashion Roadman made a much more in-depth video about Alexander Wang's time at Balenciaga, which I would recommend you check out since I am too lazy to get into it. As mentioned previously, Wang was only at Balenciaga for a short period of time, with him leaving the brand in July of 2015, being there only for 6 seasons. He did well for the brand and his collections were obviously very profitable, but he was busy doing other stuff too, like working on his own line as well as a collection for H&M. But let's just leave it at that before my video gets demonetized. And finally, the moment all of us Zoomers have been waiting for, the only designer that we actually care about, the GOAT, Demna. I did talk about Demna more in my 10 brands in 10 minutes video a while back, and that was while he was still at Vetements, but I'll go over as much as I can again. He's a very interesting and accomplished individual, so I'm sorry if I miss anything. I'll leave a few articles and interviews with him below because he's certainly one of my favorite designers in recent years, and he's a major reason as to why a lot of people believe Balenciaga is trolling, for a lack of a better word. Born in Georgia in 1981, Demna had a great passion for fashion, and would go on to study at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Antwerp, where he would graduate with his master's degree in fashion in 2006. The Royal Academy of Fine Arts, obviously being a very renowned school, you all know the Antwerp Six came from there, obviously, and so did a plethora of other very successful alumni. Walter van Beirendonck was the one who initially interviewed Demna for his entrance exam to the Royal Academy, which would drastically change his life. He was quickly gaining recognition upon releasing his graduate collection and would soon go on to work alongside Walter. Afterwards, Demna would go on to work under Maison Margiela, where he would work on women's collections until 2012-2013. You can tell the silhouettes and proportions used by Margiela would go on to have a great influence on Demna's future projects. He briefly spent some time at Louis Vuitton as well, where, like his time with Margiela, he reached the level of senior designer. In 2014 was when Demna would really come into his own. This is when Demna, alongside his brother Guram, as well as a few close friends, would go on to found Vetements. They certainly did things their own way, forsaking the traditional idea of a fashion label through creating ironic, edgy, rebellious, hip and cool clothes. I obviously can't do the brand justice in this short period of time, but just by looking at notable Vet design motifs, it is evident that Demna's time at the brand carried over to what he's doing with Balenciaga now. Now, Vet became very successful, it turned heads, and Demna pretty much did everything he wanted to do with the brand, which is why he left in 2019. Another reason that he left was because he became the creative director of Balenciaga in 2015, so now he'd have more time to focus on that. When investigating the motivations behind Demna's design philosophies, he's inspired by everyday life and reinterpreting the past and...
All I'm saying is, major respect to making big ass fucking fits, you know what I mean? I gotta put some respect on him. Finally, big boys come out on top a little bit.
The future, which can be seen throughout his work at Vet and Balenciaga as well. Balenciaga, a traditional high-fashion luxury brand, has certainly been reshaped by Demna. At the time he was appointed creative director, the CEO of Balenciaga wanted someone capable of reshuffling the cards, which Demna has certainly done. Through head-turning collaborations with Fortnite and Crocs, endeavors into the metaverse, and IKEA bags and trash bags, Demna has stayed true to his philosophies of tearing down preconceived notions and rebuilding our perceptions, which is what a lot of Twitter users don't understand. It is always important to keep in mind that the Gucci Group, or Kering, owns Balenciaga still, meaning Balenciaga is a profit-oriented company with the overall goal of making money. That, combined with Demna's take on the brand that will undoubtedly attract attention no matter what he does.
This is my least favorite. This is what I mean when I say like, ugh, like... Balenciaga plastered all over this shit is just so nasty.
Contributes to the success of the brand. Through working alongside Kanye West, another obviously polarizing figure, you can see how this is the perfect storm. Personally speaking, I can see how people think that the brand is trolling or a social experiment. Looking back at Cristobal's elegant dresses and high-class, luxury, respectable motifs, and then comparing it to $700 Fortnite hoodies, someone who doesn't follow fashion too closely may be very, very confused. Likewise, in the recent Balenciaga show in New York, which was held at the New York Stock Exchange, I'm pretty sure some deep philosophical conclusions can be drawn about capitalism and $5,000 Adidas hoodies and the fetishization of finance. It's all very subversive, and it makes you think. It's pretty crazy how...
He popped off on that one. He did. These collab was solid. I will recognize
Not just
that.
Balenciaga, but so many other high fashion brands have shifted towards pandering to streetwear markets because it's so profitable. I obviously don't have all the answers, but I feel like we're reaching a boiling point here and that something is ready to burst. Specifically focusing on Balenciaga, things have only gotten more and more crazy, as amplified recently through the release of almost $2,000 trash bags, with Demna saying he couldn't miss the opportunity to make the world's most expensive trash bag. It's certainly getting crazy out there, and I think the people have had enough. In my hopeful, copium-induced mindset, I am hoping that all these crazy items can be used to fund something nice in the future. I'm tired of irony and trolling. Show me something real and beautiful. Many designer brands have a sort of staple, accessible item or even a fashion subline that can be used to fund their grander projects, like our favorite CDG Play, which funds the grander CDG lines, or even something like Dark Shadow Ramones, or whatever else is a relatively affordable staple piece that doesn't require too much effort to acquire. I think it's also important to keep in mind that you don't have to buy this stuff, and you can just be mad at Demna or share your opinions or whatever, but at the end of the day, no one is forcing you to buy $1,300 t-shirts. Simply just sit back and enjoy the madness like the rest of us. And obviously, to Balenciaga's, TikToks, runway models, and all other forms of marketing, stay true to that subversive nature. They're all very weird and unusual and make you think and then react. Anyway, I'm sure you get the idea by now. I definitely left out a lot of information, so feel free to check out the links in the description for more. As the many antics of Balenciaga show no signs of stopping in the future, it'll be interesting to see the direction the brand goes next and what wacky endeavors they'll be getting into.
What's interesting about the current conversation of this video and high fashion house in general is the fact that these houses go through creative directors, that being people who create and design collections. The issues with most creative directors currently lasting around 3 years, which brings up the question if these houses were being created with a brand or merely hanging on the threads of what originally made these houses iconic. Sorry, I am a fashion nerd. I mean, I think turnover due to I guess, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like these fashion houses became staples when there was so much more stability within them. Capitalism, of course, has caused the cycle, the trend cycle, to completely perish. But ultimately, chatters, when you look at stuff like this, inevitably it reaches your doorstep as well. It's more so, I think for the wealthy, it's more so having access to this ahead of time, like a year, 2 years, 3 years ahead of time before it moves its way down into the bargain bin at Ross Dress for Less. That's what it is. That's what rich people buy into. They want something new. They want something unique. You mean like trickle-down economics? No, I don't mean like trickle-down economics. This is entirely different. It's entirely different because it's just being... Like it's pivotal, cutting edge, quote unquote, art that makes its way down from the runway all the way into makes its way from the runway all the way into fast fashion even. Trickle down economics, on the other hand, is the false notion that there isn't a zero-sum game in who gets to have all the power and what they do with it. This clip exactly showcases your point. Devil Wears Prada. Oh.
It's a tough call. They're so different.
Something funny?
No, nothing's, it's just that both those belts look exactly the same to me. I'm still learning about this stuff and,
This stuff? Oh, okay. I see. You think this has nothing to do with you.
This is a fucking powerhouse, dude. Look at how fucking stacked this movie is. No wonder this shit was a classic. You got Stanley Tucci, Meryl Streep, and Anne Hathaway in the same fucking scene. Like,
you go to your closet and you select, I don't know, that lumpy blue sweater, for instance, because you're trying to tell the world that you take yourself too seriously to care about what you put on your back. But what you don't know is that that sweater is not just blue. It's not turquoise. It's not lapis. It's actually cerulean. And you're also blithely unaware of the fact that In 2002, Oscar de la Renta did a collection of cerulean gowns. And then I think it was Yves Saint Laurent, wasn't it, who showed cerulean military jackets? I think we need a jacket here. And then cerulean quickly showed up in the collections of 8 different designers. And then it filtered down through the department stores and then trickled on down into some tragic casual corner where you no doubt fished it out of some clearance bin. However, that blue represents
And Emily Blunt.
millions of dollars and countless jobs. And it's sort of comical how you think that you've made a choice that exempts you from the fashion industry when in fact...
Let me judge you by your clothes and claim I know everything about you. Fucking cringe, and people eat it. The drop culture is the antithesis of mass industrial fashion and proof of late-stage capitalism, fashion industrialization. The drop culture... Oh, you mean drop culture like the artificial scarcity created by low-quality, not even fashion houses, but like demonstrably lower quality mass-produced things that you normally would purchase for $35 fucking dollars? Yes, exactly, 100%. That is 100% true. I think one thing that people do fail to consider, like one of the things that I will definitely push back on, is that a lot of those big fashion houses that everybody says is like, oh, this is shit. Why would you pay for this? Why would you pay this much for this thing? You're right. Most of it is ugly. Most of it is not suited for mainstream tastes. I totally get that, especially when it's originally released. However, the reality is those brands do actually still abide by one principle, and that is their quality is very high.
You're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Fucking owned.